Welcome to the podcast Superfriends. 5 podcast producers from across North America get together to discuss podcasting.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Kundle from the Sound Off Podcast Network in Winnipeg, Canada. This is the podcast Superfriends, and the friends are back together. This may or may not be our last episode of 2024, but it's never too early to talk about predictions, and I thought that's what we would do today. We'll get into a bunch of predictions and buy, sell, and hold, but first, let's meet the Superfriends going clockwise.
Hello, I'm guessing that we're all looking at the same thing. That's me. Hey. And I want to just announce right off the bat, there is an Easter egg in this frame up of us right now for the really diehard podcast Superfriends fans, just in the predictions episode. I'm just going to put that out there. Hey, I'm Catherine O'Brien, Branch Out Programs. I am in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That is the end of me introducing myself, Jag.
Oh, okay.
None of us know how clocks work.
I just thought I was going to go. No, I thought I was going to go chronological.
This was a big mistake to go to say clockwise with young people.
Matt, you just have to call.
No, it's my fault. I'm John Gay from Jag and Detroit podcast. I'm sorry, Jag and Detroit podcasts here. As we get ready for game day tonight in my adopted NFC team.
And I'm Johnny. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm excited to talk. Buy, sell, hold.
Thought you were just going to end with "I'm excited" and stop there.
We are professionals. That's what we can say here.
I came up with the idea of buy, sell, and hold, but I think one of you said that's a TV show as well. Who makes buy, sell, and hold famous?
Bill Simmons does this on his podcast. He does a lot of like player stock. You know, when they're talking about, he does it a lot with NFL and NBA players. So if a player is not living up to expectations so far in their career, but he really likes him, he's like, "Hey, sell me his stock. Sell me your Jaden Ivey stock, who plays for the Pistons. Sell me your Jaden Ivey stock. I'm loading up on."
I have not
Jaden
adopted
Ivey
them. I did not know that name.
Well, you don't have to adopt them. You can pick and choose, Jag. When the Patriots suck, you can adopt the Lions, but the Celtics are still good. So you're like, "Oh, I'm still a Celtics fan. Must be nice."
It is. I'm sitting pretty here.
Who thought we'd get to the day on December 1st when the Patriots were eliminated from postseason contention?
You know what's sad is I Googled, like, have they ever been eliminated from postseason on their bye week? And I found, yes, 2023.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's a trend.
Well, we're gunning towards 2025, and podcast predictions were pretty sexy for a long time. And one of the things that I found doing research is that many people aren't making as many hot take type predictions as there were in the past, but there are still a few out there. So I thought we'd go over what I found so far to date as we record this in December of 2024. And I'll throw the first one up here, and we'll make it an easy one. This is a general one that I think has been circulating. That's politicians can move the needle by appearing on podcasts.
Catherine
she's got signs.
Okay, if you're not watching the video version, Catherine. So unfortunately, podcasting is primarily audio, so you're going to have to vocalize your call-outs.
I'm just setting it up. First of all, is that not erroneous that you're starting us off on the wrong foot here, Johnny? Is podcasting just audio at this point? Anyway, yes, I do have a buy sign for this particular one. And I will expound on it right now. Yeah, I think that this was really a very pivotal time in the United States for our elections. We saw podcasts have a very strong impact on just some relatability for certain presidential candidates. Let's say that.
We can say the names. We can say the names. It worked for Trump. It didn't work. Kamala tried it. It worked for Trump.
And I think it worked
should have done more of it.
And I think it worked for J.D. Vance too, who's for the more general public, maybe a little lesser known. And he and Trump went on some very prominent podcasts and were able to talk extendedly and have all those things that we always talk about for podcasting, that they are a know, like, and trust tool, that they are a room for you to get into nuanced and deeper territory. You can expound on ideas and really get into the nitty gritty. All of those things that make podcasts a vehicle that we really enjoy and like, especially for our clients, that they can do all those things from them. This was really the time where they had the podcasting had an impact on the overall electoral process, in my opinion. So I say buy.
Yeah, I would buy as well. And I think I'm more of a buy hold. I think that I've have owned some of this stock because I think this is sort of a slow candle burning. 2024 was where it really popped into the mainstream. But I mean, in 2016, Bernie was doing podcasts. In 2020, Joe Biden and Trump were doing podcasts. And this is the one where it really came into the mainstream, I think. And I think what some people may be missing is the fact that there was such a disparity between how many Trump did and how many Kamala didn't do. I think that really launched the conversation forward of this really helped him because they saw how many votes Trump ended up getting and all of the shows he was doing versus Kamala seemed to be pulling back and not doing as many. And people thought it was 50-50. I thought it was 50-50 up until the election day. So I think that that's the little angle that I'm taking on that.
I'll be the contrarian here, and I'm going to say hold. I want to scream from the mountaintops that podcasts decided this election because, let's be honest, that would be self-serving for me and for this group. I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, but I think there were a lot of other factors that decided the election. What I will say in support of podcasts in the 2024 election is that you are not seeing the mainstream media interviews. You are not seeing, I believe Harris did do a 60 Minutes interview. Trump did not, if I'm not mistaken. But you didn't see extensive interviews with network news anchors. You didn't see them coming on cable news. You didn't see them doing this. They really felt the best way to reach their audiences were podcasts. Now, and I will say, there's podcasts really go across all demographics age-wise. But if you look at the massive split in the electorate, which was with younger voters, men overwhelmingly went Trump and women overwhelmingly went Harris, which explains why Trump went on Rogan and Harris went on Call Her Daddy. Could you argue that Harris should have gone on Rogan? Probably. I don't know if Trump would have worked on Call Her Daddy, but there's just there's momentum here for podcasting. Did they decide the election? In my opinion, no. Were they a significant factor that it can no longer be overlooked by mainstream political candidates running for the highest office in the land? Absolutely.
Well, it's the same thing we always talk about with why podcasts work for outside of politicians, why podcasts work for businesses. Why do we always say they work for businesses? It humanizes the brand. The candidate is the brand. Now, instead of I have a 60 Minutes interview where it feels very corporatized. It feels like there's that wall in between the person and the person the viewer and the person that is being viewed or being interviewed. The podcast brings that down because now it's an hour, it's an hour and a half, or in Trump's and JD's advance, it's 2-3 hours of it's not scripted. You can tell it's just a conversation. Again, there are some things that politicians will continue to do. They probably will bring in guidelines of, hey, we're not going to talk about this. I'm sure Trump and JD probably had some of things where it's like, we don't want to talk about this. We're going to ignore this or edit this, things like that. But it does feel like that wall comes down a little bit more, similar to what we see when businesses start podcasts.
And let me say this to Jag's point. Maybe the better thing to say is not necessarily that did this move the needle for a particular person to be elected. This revealed where legacy media is. I think that is really the truer thing, is that podcasting has shown where legacy media is. And even just in the numbers, just the reach of the podcast versus the reach of what we would, the legacy things that we'd normally associate with the election cycles.
Fantastically put and well executed, better than I did. I know you're moderating today, but Matt, you have an opinion on this? Okay,
hold.
Why? He says hold.
I'm going to say hold, and because it's not really politicians who can gain. It's Call Her Daddy. It's Joe Rogan. It's the podcast industry. So politicians, their best practice for going onto a podcast can't be in an election year. It's got to be any time in the last 4 years. The most memorable politician appearance I can recall is Bernie Sanders appearing on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And that was 2 years ago. But, you can talk about the issues of the day. You can actually have the entire political spectrum to yourself and not be in and amongst the noise of an election campaign, which is very, very noisy. And so if you can go in and do this long form podcast outside of election and campaign, I think you can move the needle, but I'm going to just be on a hold for now with this.
Is
we
that a
really
hold
haven't.
from your stop? You don't own any stock and you're not buying any, or you're keeping the stock that you already have in anticipation that is going to go up in value? Because I think we should distinguish.
I'm not going to buy this thing.
Okay.
I'm not going to buy it. What I really like to see, and it's going to happen, is somebody really stick their foot in it on a podcast and have their career sink.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
I would love to, I'll put this out there, produce any podcast for those running in 2026, 2028. I will happily put together a podcast for you and happily take your campaign money to do it.
Oh, Jack, can you imagine the red tape and the amount of back and forth editing? You have to take this out. He breathes too long in this
Build
one.
that into the pricing, baby. Build it in.
Can you think about the ad we could make for that? Things not go your way in 2024. 2026 might be your year. Have you thought about having a podcast called Jag?
Are you volunteering to voice that for me, Matt? That'd be fantastic.
I'll voice that for you.
I'm Jag in Detroit, and I endorse and I approve this message.
All the predictions going forward are going to be the things that Catherine has touched on so far in this show. So we'll start with this one. This one was part of Steve Goldstein's recent newsletter, and that's mainstream media is melting. And Catherine just touched on it a second ago. Ooh, big buy.
She flashed her buy right away.
That's right. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's, to me, that's the real lesson of this entire time is the and let me just quote this. Speaking of podcasts, Mark Andreessen recently was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and his point, which I took very thoughtfully, was that this was the first internet election. That this is the time when the internet has really penetrated the mainstream and it made the difference, including things like podcasting. And like we were just saying, I do think that this shows what position the legacy media holds now in our society. Some of it is generational, some of it is trust, some of it is lack of innovation. All of those things I think play into this. And that
Jag, you want to jump on board?
Let me defer to you first, Matt, and I'll pick up from you.
Yeah, so I have a prediction coming up shortly that does sort of dovetail into this, but I will. I'm not sure.
Let go, Matt. Join us. Join us in the future.
Yeah,
let go.
I'm not going to be a full buyer of this because they still have. They still own quite a lot. They have a lot of eyeballs still. They definitely own the live stream. In the on-demand area, not so much. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the erosion. So I'm not really prepared to be a buyer on mainstream media melting.
Matt, what is your view on the persuasion power of mainstream media or legacy media?
Diminished. But the eyeballs are still there.
I'm gonna buy, with a caveat. So I'm gonna buy, and then I'm gonna give an example to contradict myself. But
I'm gonna buy, and here's why you should sell.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy the theory that mainstream media is melting. Steve Goldstein's article was fantastic. I know Matt and I both shared it on social media. It's because of the cuts. It's because everybody is cutting staff on the TV and the radio side. Newspapers aren't even worth mentioning at this point in 2024. But on the TV and radio side, we're seeing so many cuts, so much consolidation, so many decisions being made by corporate bean counters as opposed to content creators that with less staff, burning out faster, doing more and more jobs, I just don't think they'll be able to compete the way they used to. It's not dead, but it is melting. And then my loving counterpoint to myself is one of my very good friends lives in San Francisco, and they had a tsunami warning earlier today, December 5th, due to an earthquake in the Pacific Ocean. I texted him. I said, "Tsunami warning? You okay?" And he said, "Yeah, we were actually driving back into town, and the news talk station in San Francisco gave us the updated cancellation of the tsunami warning, and they were live and they were local and they were on that." So we saw that also with the hurricanes in North Carolina earlier this year. So mainstream media has a place for now. But if San Francisco makes cuts, is there going to be somebody there to report on the tsunami? If North Carolina makes cuts, is there going to be somebody there to report on the relief? So it's still there, but it's hanging on by a thread.
I have a couple buy. I have buy for a couple reasons. Buy one is I think we saw back to tying it back to the election again, I think one of the other things that was new about this election cycle was this poly market, Kalshi betting market thing. It seemed like what all of the polls were saying was it's neck and neck, it's neck and neck, it's neck and neck, it's swinging this way, it's swinging this way, versus the markets, the betting markets, the actual people willing to put their dollars on what's going to happen, had Trump ahead the majority of the time. And that betting market turned out to be more accurate than the actual national pollsters. So I think that is separation number one. The second one is dovetails off of what Jag was saying, was I think that national legacy media is melting, and that's being replaced by podcasting shows like Rogan, shows like the independent journalists that are creating their own shows, whether it's, Pod Save America, whether it's Tim Pool, people like that. But I think what we talked about a few months ago was the opportunity in podcasting is for the niche local market. I think niche local legacy media probably still has a chance because of exactly what Jag just said, the tsunami warnings, people looking at their local papers, their local media, understanding what's happening in their own communities. I think that probably has the best chance for survival versus national media, national legacy media.
Well, I'm gonna give you a counterpoint there, Johnny, because I think we've seen a lot of the cuts on the local side as well in media. And
Sure.
as the lone person on this call who lives in a swing state, and I know you were Catherine and Johnny, you were inundated with ads, I'm sure, to a point. I was wall to wall ads September, October, November.
imagine.
Every single thing that I watched, whether it was my local stations via YouTube TV, which is my cable provider, or YouTube itself, which at this point I watch almost as much as I watch regular television. Every single ad was Trump is horrible, Harris is horrible, and we had a Senate race here too in Michigan. So the idea that, am I going to watch local television when in an election when all I get is these horrible ads over and over and over again? I remember it was a big line of demarcation for my wife and I a couple weeks after the election. We finally finished everything on our DVR that was recorded pre-election. And then we were finally done with all the political ads because we finally got through all the programming pre-November 5th.
That's funny.
Well, and it's even a generational thing too, Jag. Like even what you just said, like I don't watch YouTube TV. I don't watch cable TV. I don't know anybody in my age group that watches any of that.
Sports?
I haven't paid for even sports. Don't even really watch it. Like I'll pick up, playoff basketball, college basketball, and March Madness occasionally, but and even with the NFL, you're seeing that's moving to Amazon. That's moving to Peacock.
Yeah.
Is the streaming services are starting to pick off these things one by one, and even the streaming services are starting to bundle together as well. Get Hulu, Amazon, and whatever HBO Max together, Apple TV for this set price. So I think there's a generational gap as well. I think that as the baby boomers start to age out of being consumers in the economy, I think that's going to be the next kind of major slash to the neck of that. Because you look at airports, you look at retirement homes, they've got CNN, Fox, MSNBC. That shit is just on a loop all day long. And I think that makes up for a majority of the viewers that they're seeing. I think it's a lot worse than what we're even seeing now.
Do those viewers count in ratings, Matt? I don't know if they do, but I mean, but in
Yes.
terms of, they do. Okay, well there you go. I think you make a great point there, Johnny. It's the world is changing. If you woke up from a 40-year coma and you said, "Hey, I'm gonna watch a movie. Let me go to Blockbuster," you'd be in for quite a surprise today.
Yeah.
Catherine also touched on this one. We are now in the era of what's a podcast? That's from Steve Goldstein. So, Catherine, you touched on this earlier, being like, what's a podcast? Is it on YouTube? Is it on Apple? Is it on Spotify? It's two people talking into microphones. Do you agree that we're now in the era of what's a podcast?
I'll go first. Or do you want to? Okay, I'm going to sell. I think, and the reason is if you look at something, whether it's on Apple, whether it's on YouTube, whether it is on X or Bluesky, or which I like calling it Bluesky, or
good.
Instagram or
Bluesky.
YouTube, I think I mentioned, and you say, is it a podcast? The answer is yes. That definition is universal across content. If it is a long form recording, and long form I think anything longer than a TikTok is considered long form. now, it can be a podcast. I think that I forget what I think Jag sent over some talking points, and one of them was the rise of the micro podcast, which is 10 minutes. That's a podcast. If it's audio only, that's a podcast. It's only on YouTube. That's still a podcast. It's content. When we've talked about this over this past year, is that the word podcast has kind of melted into the just content. And I would sell on this, because you can just call it a podcast, and as long as you're talking into the camera or talking into the microphone and it's going on the internet and it's longer than a TikTok, you can call it a podcast. I think the RSS believers, I don't want to bring up that argument again, but the
RSS truthers,
the RSS truthers, yeah, the QRSS. I think that they might be holding on to a dying belief, because it's expanded so much beyond that. Not that that's not a podcast anymore. You can still have an RSS feed podcast. It's just now everything else encompassing that. That's also, yes, it's a podcast.
I am going both here.
Oh,
I'm going buy and sell, and let me explain what
maybe
I mean.
he's going to sell short.
I'm not smart enough to follow all those kinds of things, margins and all that. Okay, so in the what's a podcast era, to put it in Taylor Swift parlance, are you talking about podcasters or are you talking about consumers? If you're talking about podcasters, I'm buying this, because there is this whole verklemtness of what is a podcast and pearl clutching and, oh my God, and is it a podcast? Is it not really a podcast? RSS feed, audio, video, YouTube, Spotify, Apple. The people in the podcasting industry, from the OGs to the content creators, or older content creators, and older, I mean seasoned content creators, not age, they are feeling that way. But to Johnny's point, consumers are not. Consumers could not give a hoot about what is or isn't a podcast. They call everything a podcast. I'd be surprised if they, watched their YouTube video of a cruise ship and didn't call it a podcast at this point. It doesn't, and to paraphrase The Rock, it doesn't matter what a podcast is. So consumers don't care. The only people who care are the people creating the content and talking in the industry. And I think that's where I'm buying for one audience and selling for the other. Catherine?
Yeah, I think I was going to hold. There's my little
hourglass.
Look at my hourglass to
Why didn't
hold
you give
on.
us props? You could have mailed us props. You clearly had time to make these.
I thought you were just watching the time pass with the days of our lives.
That is correct. I'm doing both of those things, and but now I think I'm going to sell, because I'm kind of tired of this decision. One of the most freeing things that I, as a podcast producer, realized is this is a niche product for a niche audience. There is a lot of freedom in realizing that podcasting is sort of niche, and the horse is out of the stable. What the mass public believes is a podcast might be different than what the RSS feed is. People who are the QRSS or the RSS truthers, they are correct and wrong at the same time. That's what I will say about that. And I think that we just have to adapt to what the general public understands as a podcast. And I wish we were past this a little bit.
Can I say one more thing, Matt?
Oh, yeah.
Rather than asking what is a podcast, or is this a podcast, if you're on the creator or the production side, change that question to two new questions. Who is this for? Is it good?
Ooh.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Then it doesn't matter. You want to put it on YouTube? Fine. You want to put it on Apple? Great. You want to put it on X? Great. You want to put it on TikTok? Awesome.
I'm buying that comment.
Who is it for, and is it good? Then that is your launching point. And
then it goes on Bluesky.
Then it goes on Bluesky.
Yeah.
I'm an RSS truther. I love the RSS feed.
But you don't have tears streaming down your face as all of us are talking.
And you've been doing this longer than any of us on this call, to be fair, Matt.
True.
Yeah, but I'm not upset that all this other stuff exists, like YouTube and Spotify. I think it can be quite useful. I just don't think that we should be spending our time taking our content and uploading it to these walled gardens and thinking that it's going to do us any good. I'm happier with it as an RSS feed than I am as a video on Spotify. I don't know that I need YouTube for anything else other than the search. And I'm going to live in RSS land for the next little while.
If I could comment on what you just said there, Matt, it depends on what your goal is for your podcast. If you're selling your podcast on download numbers, yeah, you want the RSS feed. You want to be able to go to an advertiser and say, I have this many downloads, or if you're YouTube exclusive, this many views. For me, for example, my podcast, the Jag Show podcast, I'll plug my own show since David isn't here to plug his, is about creating awareness for my brand and my podcast production agency. So I post the video to Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and I post it natively in each app, not just the link, because the app algorithm likes it when you post native video. So I don't care how many views I get on TikTok versus Instagram versus Facebook. I just care that I'm maximizing eyeballs and ear holes for my message.
I'll buy that.
Yeah. Bye.
Big buy there.
Wow, we got two buy comments out of this this particular segment of the discussion. I like it a lot.
We are all buying each other what each one of us is selling, which I think is quite nice.
That's why we get along so well.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch here. I'm trying to figure out which one isn't going to annoy us if I pull it up here.
Poke the bear, Matt. Go ahead.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out which one, because this one is, I think we've already done this one, so I'm not going to touch it. I'll just put it up, and if anybody wants to groan, go ahead.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So we've covered that a dozen times.
Yeah.
Depending on who you ask. YouTube is, for those listening, the line is YouTube is eating podcasting. Depending on who you ask, number one for search, number one from consumption. So it depends what you call podcasting.
Yeah. So for discovery, I would agree, but I don't know about consumption necessarily.
Depends on which survey you read and which webinar you attend.
And who your audience is. If your audience is if your audience wants to watch what you're doing, then yeah, YouTube is eating podcasting. If your audience is simply there consuming, they just care about the content, they don't matter where it is, then no, not necessarily.
Fine. We'll get rid of this. Spotify wants to be like YouTube.
Buy. They're pushing it so hard. I tweeted this out today. So Spotify does their Wrapped for podcasters. You know how everyone got their Spotify Wrapped for their music consumption for the year? They also do one if you have your podcast on Spotify, which if you're listening and you don't get it on there right now, turn this off and go put your podcast on Spotify, please.
Bye.
But at the very end, they offered, here's 4 tips on how to grow in 2025. And I posted this without my comment on it. I thought it was total bull. I thought it was just like, this is just high level, just crap advice. Sorry, Spotify. The first one was upload a clip, share a short video to promote episodes to help fans discover your show on Spotify. So now Spotify wants you to put a short clip, not just a video version of your podcast, a short. YouTube has delved really big into shorts because they want to be like TikTok. Spotify wants to be like YouTube, who wants to be like TikTok. The second one, give comments some love. So Spotify now has comments on their podcasting
like
ability,
Apple,
like YouTube as well. And Apple and TikTok. Remind fans to comment on your episodes to show them love by liking and replying. Now, even the hosts who you own your podcast, you can look at the comments and you can reply to those comments just like on YouTube. Ask fans to follow you. That's separate. That's its own thing. Every app wants you to follow the creators on their own app. That doesn't necessarily count. But this is all just high-level advice that we're talking about. Share your show was the fourth one. This is all just high-level stuff. But yes, Matt, they are really pushing and I've talked about this a few months ago. From what I've heard from people inside Spotify, Spotify is really pushing the video side of it. I just don't get it. Spotify is for music. People have it for music and for podcasts. They're listening to it on their phone, in their pocket, while they're driving, while they're mowing the lawn, while they're vacuuming. It's not, I'm not like Matt does this great all the time. I'm just going to steal your movement, Matt. I don't want to do this when I'm consuming my podcast. And for those of you listening, I'm holding up my phone to my eyes. It doesn't. Yes. Bye.
I checked my Spotify Wrapped today, and it's my number one app that I use to listen to music when I'm drinking.
It tells you that, or you just
no? These are all the songs I listen to when I'm drinking.
Give us one. Give us one title.
Well, there was Jethro Tull, Aqualung. There was Bad Company. It looked like a bad classic rock station. I must have left it just running. And
the Canadian national anthem on repeat.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic Rewind with Matt Kundle.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Spotify Wrapped. If you're listening to that when you're drinking, that's pretty sad every November when that thing shows up.
Catherine, are you recovering to chime in on this one?
Well, you know what? I think that not much deeper than what we've already gone. What I find, I'll take it a little high level here. The apps trying to be like each other is disastrous. I think.
Yes.
I think we've seen that with Instagram. To me, Instagram is virtually unusable now because it
Oh my
was
God.
trying so hard to become a TikTok clone. That is not innovative to to start copying your competition, and people like the different apps for the different functions that they offer. So Spotify, I mean, I like that Spotify has podcasts available. That's great, but just to that it's not YouTube. Don't try to become YouTube, please.
I'm also buying this. The Spotify want to be like YouTube. I cannot underline and underscore what Catherine just said enough. And the other piece of it too, we talked a moment ago about RSS feed versus not. If you're counting RSS downloads for your show, Spotify has snuck this in to say, hey, you don't have to host your show on Spotify to be able to put your show as a video up on Spotify. And people think, oh, great, I can put the video on Spotify. Well, guess what? If you do that and someone consumes it, it doesn't count as a download for your RSS feed. So they're cannibalizing themselves. I completely agree with Johnny said. It's an audio consumption platform. Do not try to be all things to all people. Spotify is, somebody inside Spotify told me they about 6 months ago they have more of an emphasis on music than podcast. That might be changing, but stop trying to do everything. None of these apps are going to be able to do everything. And I feel like if I could grab these CEOs and shake them by the shoulders and say, you're not going to be everything. Do what you do well and continue to print money. Everybody's $12 a month. Just keep taking their money.
So I'm going to buy, and I'm not going to be upset at Spotify because
Okay.
I think all the changes they've made are fine. They've done nothing bad to podcasters in doing this. They've given us an option to upload video. They haven't taken away our ability to, put in the RSS feed. Our dynamic audio is still there. They've added comments, and that's a good thing because I think that's why YouTube is so successful at podcast discovery, is that you can find it quickly, you can comment on it. There's, interaction between the host and the listener. So I don't think there's any, I did get a little bit riled up when I started to put videos up, and then I lost the opportunity for dynamic audio, but I still have the options. So Spotify's done good thing for podcasting. So I'm happy.
One loving counterpoint to that is when these options start coming in, though, we don't know what Spotify will reward. So, for example, like when just to go back to YouTube as an example. So, if you watch a YouTube video and they're like, "Hey, I think X, Y, and Z. What do you think? Put it your comment down in the comment box." It's because YouTubers figured out that YouTube rewards when there are lots of comments. So when you start adding all these different little elements in there, we don't know what Spotify is going to be rewarding to the podcaster. So if you get algorithm magic because you're responding to comments, now it's like you're following what Spotify wants, not necessarily what you wanted to do for your show or for your audience, or all of those things. That's all I can think of.
And one of the things too is we want to, part of this too is it's sometimes too hard to fight the machine. So
Great way.
actually every time it's too hard to fight the machine. So it's actually pretty easy for us in this case with Spotify to actually lean in and roll with the tide. So, okay, you want us to upload video? Fine. Start putting video up on there. I'm not there yet, but in terms of working with hosts, and if there are hosts of podcasts listening to this, this is a really easy change for you. Okay, Spotify is promoting people commenting on our podcast. Great. At the top of our show, hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into the episode. By the way, make sure you're listening on Spotify. And if you have any feedback about the show, leave a comment there. I will be responding. That's where I'm checking. If you want something in on the show, if you want something to change, if you want your voice heard, leave a comment on Spotify. There's a link to it in the show notes. Boom. Now we're leaning into the machine and we can ride the wave of what Spotify is promoting. So I change my tone of being negative to where I'm sort of indifferent now, and I'm on Matt's side where it's just Spotify is going to make these changes. Fine. What is the best way for us and for the people that we work with to maximize or to ride that wave?
Yeah, and also, what do I know? I'm not a billionaire owner of an app. You know?
Yet.
Yeah, you're right.
Jinx.
So here's an RSS truther, possibly, Ross Adams from Acast. RSS is the foundation, the backbone of our industry, and needs to be preserved to ensure the future of this podcast space.
Sell.
Bye.
Sorry. Sell.
Bye.
Hold. I want more information.
Okay, well, why don't we change this? So let's pretend the RSS has gone away. So he's saying that RSS is the backbone of the industry.
Okay.
So if the RSS feed goes away, what happens to the industry?
Can I still look at how many downloads I have in my host dashboard?
No, right?
No.
That's the whole point here, right?
That's the whole point. Okay, if there's no way to see downloads ever, then I'll buy.
Well, wait a second, Johnny. You see, you got a bunch of Spotify views, but the way Spotify counts the views is going to be different than the way YouTube counts the views. But those are plays. Maybe those are listens over on Spotify. But anyways, good luck to you adding all that together and trying to make something of it.
This calls for a spreadsheet.
Okay. Every month for a few of my clients, I put together a Google sheet of total downloads, and I pull from the hosting dashboard, and I pull from YouTube. That's 2 spots. Where else am I pulling stuff from?
Without RSS, you're pulling from Apple, you're pulling from Spotify, you might be pulling from iHeartRadio, you might be pulling from Odyssey, and any of these other podcast apps.
Okay, so if then I'll caveat: if there is no way to I can't even think of the word. If there's no way to aggregate all of these download numbers into one dashboard, then great. Let's keep the RSS feed. Outside of that, that is extremely important. I'm not going to discount that at all. Outside of that, I could care less about it.
I will just mention that the experience that I had with Bumper, where they opened up the dashboard to the Sound Off podcast, to be able to go in to see YouTube, Spotify, and Apple data all together. I had those all by myself, but I feel like it's a long trip to go through each one. But if I can see it all in one screen, I think being able to aggregate data is super, super important to be able to communicate with anyone, buyers or audiences.
In this apocalyptic scenario where there is no RSS feed,
Mad Max.
I would say there are, if that were to come to pass, there are still ways to judge the success of your show. That's engagement. That is responses that you're getting from people directly. If you give them a particular action to do and they still do it, that is also a great way to tell the health and success of your podcast. So it would not be great for those specific download numbers, but even we all have to admit, there are a couple larger players in all of those things. Not that I'm talking bad about Deezer or any of the other, ways that people are getting podcasts, but there are a couple of big players that once you get that information, you get let's use the 80-20 rule. You'll get 80% of the information of your podcast. Am I wrong?
You are not.
Yeah.
We'll move. Sharon Taylor from Triton. She says, I'm excited to see subscription models and contextual targeting take off a bit more. I wanted to shorten this down to make it a little more. I'm excited to see subscription models just go.
Yeah. What could you explain what the phrase contextual targeting?
That's like advertising, right, Matt? So like DAI that you get delivered to you are really personalized to you.
Okay.
Jag. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
these
not
are the
just
two
like
things.
my car dealership in Baton Rouge, but like, we see that you are into
Purple
hair
sweaters.
and makeup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even location-based stuff. If I'm listening to a Patriots podcast, but I'm here in Michigan, and I get an ad for a Michigan furniture store, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool that happened.
Yeah. Well, think about Instagram, and we always talk about how it seems like the phone is listening to you. It's that it's that good at what it's delivering you with your ads. That is coming to podcasting, which I think Matt was going to allude to before I so rudely cut him off. This is good for everybody. Like I said, you're leaning into it. If our phones are picking up so much information about us, it's almost like an extension of our body at this point. It's almost like an appendage at this point. I would rather get ads that are targeted for something that I'm more likely to buy on the podcast that I'm listening to versus, hey, State Farm home insurance. Again, I don't care. I don't want it.
Casper
I don't
mattress,
need it. Casper
again.
mattresses. Again, I don't care. AG1. I'm not drinking your weird green drink. Sorry. Like, I'm ready for that. And as well as the subscription models, I think as we move towards there being just so many podcasts out there and the audience is becoming so niche and everything is so saturated on social media. Everyone's posting shorts, everyone's posting mid form, everyone's posting long form. Where can I, as the audience member, find my favorite podcaster with no ads and when it's only there every single week? The $5 Patreon. Great. I'm going to throw him $5 every single month. I don't have to worry about him reading or her reading any ads to me. And I know that I'm supporting that creator directly. And I move past all the sludge on my social medias of trying to find their stuff.
Let me hit each one of the piece of these. I'm going to say buy as well for both. The contextual targeting. Trust me, after my dog died last week, you want no part of my tailored social feed because of all the ads of everything I've gotten to honor my dead dog. Trust me, you want no part of that. And not to bring the room down. Let me go back to subscription models. I have resisted this for a long time because my mantra has always been, if you want somebody to pay for your content, it damn well better be worth paying for. And I think that bar is really high. But I think a lot more folks are seeing a lot more success with it for some of the things Johnny just said. You know, it's ad-free, it's compelling. You've really built that connection with your listener. I've always been of the mindset of, well, if I'm paying for Netflix and Hulu and Paramount and Peacock, am I going to spend another $5 on a couple different podcasters? I've always said no, but the data would contradict me. I think that if the content is good enough and it's reaching that bar, that it's actually starting to take off.
Okay, so quick one right here, though. I'm going to throw this up. Subscription fatigue is real.
Yeah, I would buy that. I just signed up for Rocket Money just because, and this is not an ad for them, but it literally, you plug in all your bank accounts and your credit cards and it shows you what you're paying for every month. Thankfully, I've been on top of my subscription craziness, so I wasn't shocked at all by what I was seeing on there. I wasn't paying for anything crazy. But if you think about, if there's a podcast that you listen to every single day, every single week, without missing it once, try to think of the equivalent of that on a Netflix or an HBO Max. I can only think of one show. I watched The Penguin. That's the only show I've watched this entire year that came out where I was like, wow, this is great. Me and the wife are going to sit down and watch this every single week. Why would you pay $15.99 a month for something that you never use and you can't think of anything off the top of your head that you would want to watch on there? Or do you want to help support the creator and spend a third of that on your favorite podcast? And now you're getting it ad free, or you're getting an extra episode a week, or you're getting extra content, or you get to engage with the host directly. There is some benefit that you have to give if you're going to offer a paid thing. But yeah, I think it's such an easy thing to swap out. You just have to get your listeners to think about it and call it out in your episodes.
It's a great way to look at it.
Yeah,
so I'm a buy with subscription fatigue is real, but I have more people coming to me than ever before asking, how do we set up a Patreon for ad free? How do I get people to part with $5 a month? How do I get people to pay for my newsletter?
Right.
So, I mean, there's a disconnect there, right?
Yeah.
Between the creators knowing how to do it,
between the creators who want to do it, and the number of people willing to make purchases.
Yeah, I think it has to exist first and show proof of concept, because $25 a month versus $0 a month, there's your answer right there.
All right.
Catherine, you were going to jump in here before we move on to the next one.
I'm gonna hold on this one because I think that what Matt is poking at here is absolutely true. I think there's a perception of subscription fatigue, and we might personally feel that. This might be a case where we are not our customer, because you can look at all these podcasts that have, and I'm getting ahead of myself here. I would love in maybe a year or two to hear from like Substack. Let's just use Substack as an example. If there's a certain level of audience, let's say 10,000 people who are signed up for the free version of Substack, what percentage of those 10,000 are then also, they are paying at any level? So, because like in marketing, you see like, okay, if I send out a mass mailer, I can expect 1 to 2% of those mailers to bring back business. And we're like, you got to be kidding
Yeah.
me. Like that seems so low. My radio guys here can confirm those kinds of numbers, but people will spend big money to send out those mailers. Well, I wonder what the same sort of percentage or threshold would be for those podcasts that are relying on the subscription model. Because if you have an audience and the audience is passionate about what you're doing, and they see it as supporting the show or the product, and podcasts lean into the parasocial relationship. When we are really into a podcast, we really feel like we know them, we're supporting their work, whatever. Those are the kinds of things that are going to make people sign up at a manageable threshold, like $5 a month. But I would be interested to see what, like if you have an audience of 5,000 people, is that when you should start, getting into the subscription model where you're doing those extra pieces of content? Did I make it? I don't know if I made that very clear.
You did
There's got to be
complete sense.
A lot of it, I'm sure, depends on audience size and sort of engagement and responsiveness of your audience. And I would love to see a little bit more information about what is that threshold? What is that point?
I think in addition to is to audience size as to whether you should start one, and this is something I feel like I'm playing all the hits on here. With something else that we've talked about when you're considering starting, privatizing your podcast to an extent, is do you have that thing to offer? Do you have the time? Do you have the desire to do an extra episode, to take the time to cut your ads out, or I guess you cut your ads out, or do audience Q&A, do that extra work that it takes, because you can't offer nothing and expect nothing that people are getting for free and expect them to pay for it. If they're already used to getting it for free, you can't entice them to pay for it. There has to be a thing that they're getting for it.
A tease. Something that you were going to respond to, right?
Yeah.
Last year, it was nothing but a lot of AI talk, but here's a quote. The more AI generated hokum that's out there, the more my work, my human insight is going to stand above the noise. Dusty Weiss, PodCamp Media.
I'll buy that.
What is the definition of hokum?
Yeah. Dusty, by the way, is a great dude. I've met him at Podcast Movement. You can tell when AI has written show notes, unless it's very well trained to your specific voice. You can tell. Johnny and I were talking about this on our private call last week. A lot of these automated AI speech enhancers, you can tell when it's been run through that. You can tell when something is a little bit muddy 98% of people probably can't, but to the trained ear, you can hear when something has been auto-enhanced by AI. I always say this, anytime you are doing anything with AI, you have to have a human check it and tweak it. You can't just trust the AI, or it's going to be hot garbage.
I'm going to hold. I think AI has a ton of benefits to help people that are making podcasts, whether you're a host and helping you generate content, or whether you're on the back end, on the production side, and helping you put together the podcast. I think the human element will always be needed, but I think it is going to, if you're not using AI, if you're just discounting it completely, every step of the process in creating a podcast becomes quicker when you implement AI. So you can, I think I agree that the human insight and that Dusty's work will stand above the rest when you compare it to solely AI, but you have to implement some level of AI into your workflow in order to make this faster. And
I
make
agree.
it easier.
AI should be a complement, not something you're relying on.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think AI can ever create content on the creativity that a human can. Like if you look at those, I think Sora is one of them, one of those video creation ones. It just looks, you can just tell there's just something off about it, I think. And I think Ben Affleck was on an interview and he made a really good really good point, and I'll try to condense what I remember him saying. But basically, AI cannot recreate human emotion the way that humans can in terms of a creativity from writing a script or actually putting that script into reality, whether it's acting it out or putting it into a podcast mic. I don't think it'll ever be able to do that without being sentient. And right now, AI is not sentient. Not to put my tinfoil hat on, but it's just from that standpoint, it cannot push the human being out of the picture.
And I think this is an opportunity. I often think about the questions and the territory and the depth of a conversation to get into those things that AI can't replicate. One of the tricks is you have to know what those things are before you start bringing your interviewee, your guest to those places. Storytelling is probably something that everybody could brush up on a little bit to make their interviews more authentic and deeper. One of the things I've talked about with one of my clients and that I'm thinking of in particular is you have to know the questions that the person that maybe that they need a little coaxing to get into. If there's stuff that's really interesting, you have to build to those areas. AI can't do it the same way that a person who is engaged in a deeper conversation can do. Again, yet. So we'll see where we go. But I am convinced there's things that AI are not going to be able to do.
We were just
like
talking.
Ben Affleck.
We were just talking a moment ago about the connection of podcasting and that deeper connection between people. This is the perfect example of that. AI, at least yet, can't replicate that.
Yeah.
There's a B part to all this, by the way. And that's by 2025. Experts predict that 20% of all podcast content could be AI generated, opening new possibilities for content creation and personalization.
We're talking January 1st, 2025, December 31st, because we're coming up on that pretty quick, Matt.
Yeah. Well, this one was probably floating around like in the from earlier this year.
I'm selling on this.
Okay.
It's for I don't think we need to belabor the points. Everything we just said is relevant to this. I think yeah.
Okay. We're all selling.
Yeah, we're selling. There's an example.
I would hold, but Catherine, make your point.
Okay, so as I'm selling, here's an example from YouTube. This is a YouTube channel. It's a prominent true crime channel. It probably has a couple million subscribers to it. Clearly, the original owners of this channel have sold it to somebody else. So there was an 18-month gap between when the last video was posted and there was one literally yesterday was posted. The new owners have gone to an AI voice. They trained the AI voice on the voiceover actor that previously was doing it. Every single comment in the comments of YouTube were roasting them. How could you do this to us? This is clearly AI. I saw on Twitter that the voiceover actor confirms it's not him who's speaking. You know, you bought this great thing, our favorite true crime show, and now you've turned it into an AI wreck. And it was incredible. So there was like a little bit of my humanity. Like I was like, oh, faith restored that, people don't want this just sanitized. They want the real person. They can tell still. They want the real authentic thing. They want that script that a person has written. They want the real thing.
I had a whole hold argument, and Catherine just took a flamethrower to it. I'm sell. Thank you.
Okay.
Local is podcasting's big opportunity. This from Adam Curry, who said this on the New Media Show a few months ago, but still a prediction.
Johnny mentioned this earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would buy for all the reasons I stated earlier. And Matt has a great take on this that he talked about, I think, a couple episodes ago. It's huge. I don't think people don't seem to be tapping into it, and I think people should.
So I'm a buy of this. I'm a buy of this because of the other prediction that I've made that we're not going to get to today, and that's radio is dead.
Local radio is.
Local, yeah. Well, it feels that way, local radio. Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned earlier, Jag, about San Francisco and the tsunami warning, and I'm glad there were people at the radio station to be able to connect with people.
And there were in a market of that size. Would that have been the case in a small market in California? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, snowstorm up in northern Ontario last week. Nobody at the radio station. All I see are people laid off. I've never had more phone calls from radio people asking about podcasting in the last 2 weeks from Cumulus, iHeart, Rogers. Rogers is so ahead of everything and in fashion. They are now letting people go from their podcast division. That's how far ahead they are.
Trendsetters.
Massive trendsetters. We're going to get rid of the people who do the big story. Canada doesn't need something like the Daily. They don't need that. They didn't actually get rid of it. They're just going to have reporters, sort of file it, but it's not going to have it's not going to be what it once was is the thing. So anyways, yes, the opportunity it's a huge opportunity. One of the things I really think about is there's a radio station, I think, down the street from me that's on AM, and I wouldn't buy it for $1. So it's actually out of business now. They returned the license to the government, but I wouldn't buy it for $1. It's just everything that I can do here.
Yeah.
I can get on smart speakers. I can get into cars. I can pretty much do what a radio does with the exception of be on the radio, but I'm not sure it necessarily matters because most people are using the Android Auto and the CarPlay when they get into the vehicle.
A point on that, actually 2 points. Let me back up for a second. Great local podcast, the Daily Detroit podcast here in Detroit. Jeremiah Stace does a fantastic job. Politics, social, everything going on in town. Monday through Friday, he's doing yeoman's work. He does a tremendous job with that podcast. To your point about the car, this was the light bulb moment for me. I was having lunch with a friend last week, and he mentioned his soon-to-be 23-year-old daughter. He got into her car with her. None of the presets in the car were set. Zero. What do you listen to? He said, and she's a big sports fan. He said, you want to listen to a Tigers game? I'll just watch it on my phone when I get home or on the TV. No music, no news, no sports, no traffic, nothing. It just plugs in Spotify on her phone when she gets in the car, and that's it. She had set none of the presets. 23 years old. That was powerful to me.
I've lived in Fort Worth for 10 years. I could not name you one local Fort Worth radio station. What they play, which channels are the news ones, which is the classic rock, which is the hip hop station, no clue.
Well, Johnny, there's one station, they play all the hits. All the hits.
Is it the
Kiss.
Spotify channel?
Yeah, that'd probably be Kiss FM in Dallas, 106.1 if I'm not mistaken.
I'll give an example, by the way, of some local podcasts. CityCast is in a number of cities across America, including Austin, Boise, Chicago, DC, Denver, Houston, Las Vegas, Madison, Nashville, Philly, Pittsburgh, Portland, and Salt Lake. So this is already well underway, and I've met a few people who do these, and these things are really well put together, and they're finding champions of the community to do some great podcasting. So we're all buyers of that, right?
I think we're all buyers, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
We continue to buy.
Well, here's one that we're going to reject. So we don't need to talk about this, do we?
For those not watching, it says podcasting will break $2 billion in ad revenue.
Yeah. So I put that one up there jokingly because it's been predicted every year for the last 5 years and it just hasn't happened. All right. Hey guys, do you think if we wrap this up and I say that we're going to go counterclockwise, that Johnny will pick up and understand that he's going to be the first one to say goodbye here?
He might know. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If you are watching, we respond to comments on Spotify, so please go comment there. I will look at them and respond and like them, and you can talk to me directly. But if you want to get in touch with any of us, we will hear our socials, and you'll probably see them in the show notes, but you can follow me on X at Johnny Podcasts.
I'm John Gay from Jag in Detroit Podcast. Every social media platform you come up with, including Bluesky, you can just find me at Jag in Detroit.
Isn't that more fun to say?
It is.
Blue scheme. I like it. Hey, the podcast Super Friends, Super Fans, we'd love for you to sign up for our exclusive Substack. Send us each money. Don't forget, Matt takes Canadian. So just putting that out there. My name is Catherine O'Brien, and you can see me on Twitter/X. Hello, Catherine O.
You can find me on Twitter at Matt Kundle. You can find me on Blue Sky at mattkundle.com. Yes, you can actually attach your domain name. Ask me how.
Matt taught me that. He's the expert on this.
And I stole it from James Cridland, who said, you really should be doing that. And whenever James Cridland says you should be doing that, I generally feel the need that I have
You
to
do it.
that.
That's a buy right there.
Thank you.
Wait, Dave's here?
No, I have a Roadcaster too. I did it in his honor.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the podcast Super Friends. For a transcript of the show or to connect with the Super Friends, go to the show notes of this episode or go to soundoff.network.